was a quiet morning in Morrisville, North Carolina, the kind of suburban calm that makes you believe nothing could ever go wrong here. But on April 14th, that calm was shattered by a call to 911. The voice on the other end reported a double suicide inside a house on Seagrave Place. The dispatcher's tone remained steady, but beneath the surface there was tension. The kind of tension that creeps in when something just doesn't sound right. First responders arrived to a small home office, where the air was heavy with the harsh smell of gasoline. The room was cluttered, yet staged. A red gas can, a neatly typed suicide note, and, at the center, the lifeless body of Nabaruna Karmakar. There were 2 gunshot wounds, one to the back of the head, immediately fatal, according to experts, and a second at the left temple. For seasoned investigators, details like these are more than just evidence. They tell a story, and sometimes they reveal a script that someone desperately wants you to believe. But there were things that didn't fit. The angle of the wounds, the pattern of gunshot residue, and even the placement of props in the room all suggested something more deliberate, something staged. Was this really a tragic pact, or was the truth more sinister? The so-called double suicide unraveled in less than a day. What started as a tragic report quickly evolved into a complex crime scene. For detectives, the question shifted. If this wasn't what it seemed, then who wrote the final act? In true crime, the devil is always in the details. And in Morrisville, every detail was about to turn the story on its head. Before the headlines, before the chaos of that April morning, there was simply Nabaruna. Born in Behala, a bustling neighborhood in Kolkata, India, Nabaruna Karmakar was the pride of her family. Those who knew her describe a young woman with a quiet strength, studious, meticulous, and deeply devoted to her roots. She excelled in academics, pushing boundaries until she earned her PhD in industrial engineering from North Carolina State University, a journey that brought her across the world, but never severed her ties to home. In the workplace, Nabaruna was steady and precise, holding an analyst position at SAS, a prestigious software company in nearby Cary. She navigated complex data by day, but her true compass always pointed to family and heritage. Bengali culture was her anchor, even as she built a new life far from India. December 2019 marked a new chapter. In a ceremony blending tradition and hope, Nabaruna married Michael Aaron Matthews, a union celebrated with the vibrant rituals of Hindu wedding customs. Together, they settled in Morrisville. With them came Ralphie, their beloved dog, a bundle of energy who, for a time, filled the house with life. But when Ralphie passed away, friends noticed something shifted in Nabaruna. The loss left a quiet ache, one that seemed to linger, reshaping the rhythm of her days. Gradually, subtle changes appeared. Once an active participant in the Bengali community, Nabaruna started to withdraw. She would arrive at gatherings but leave early. Conversations became shorter, her laughter quieter. Friends wondered, was it just the stress of a new marriage, or something deeper? Behind closed doors, a life can fracture in silence. The world outside may see only the highlights: a new job, a happy wedding photo, a home in a safe neighborhood. But beneath that surface, every life carries private shadows. In the weeks leading up to her death, Nabaruna's circle noticed the distance growing, even if few understood what it truly meant. From the outside, it all seemed routine. Yet, as the months wore on, the subtle signs of strain became impossible for those close to Nabaruna to ignore. Colleagues at SAS, once accustomed to her calm focus and steady productivity, began to notice a shift. She looked tired, not just physically, but emotionally drained. Lunch breaks grew shorter, her replies more guarded. In private, some heard her allude to walking on eggshells at home. What was happening behind the doors of that quiet house in Morrisville? Emails and text messages told a story of growing distance. Friends recalled exchanges that felt clipped, with Nabaruna carefully sidestepping questions about her marriage. Was she happy? Why did she never seem to talk about future plans with her husband? She never sounded desperate, a close friend shared, but it was like she was carrying something alone. There were rumors, whispered among the Bengali community, that she had mentioned separating, a thought she never voiced openly. As the months passed, her attendance at community gatherings became even more sporadic. She declined invitations to lead events, citing personal matters. Family members back in India sensed the change too. Calls home became less frequent, and when her parents pressed her, "Are you happy, Nabaruna?" she dodged the question, changing the subject or cutting the conversation short. Yet, there were no outward signs of a crisis, no documented evidence of depression, no explicit cry for help, no mention of self-harm. Her digital footprint, social media, emails, messages, lacked the hallmarks investigators look for in cases of planned suicide. Was Nabaruna simply overwhelmed, or was she silently signaling for help in ways no one recognized? Sometimes, the most dangerous storms are the ones that gather quietly. Looking back, the warning signs were there, embedded in her absences, her silences, her reluctance to confide. But in real time, they slipped past almost everyone's notice. In the weeks before her death, Nabaruna's world had grown smaller, the signals of distress drowned out by the routines of daily life. April 13th, 2023, began like any other Thursday in Morrisville. But as the sun dipped behind the quiet rows of suburban homes, a carefully laid plan began to unfold, one that would shatter more than a sense of safety. Surveillance footage and receipts would later piece together a chilling timeline. That afternoon, Michael Aaron Matthews walked into Bass Pro Shops alone. Under the store's fluorescent lights, he purchased a handgun, several boxes of ammunition, a bright red gas can, and zip ties. He paid cash, no questions asked. There was an eerie deliberateness in these choices. Why would a man need all this, and why the cash, instead of a card that would leave a clearer trail? Night fell. Inside the Matthews home, hours ticked by, hours for which there is still no independent witness. What really happened between the couple in those silent rooms? What words were spoken? What fears confessed, before violence shattered the silence? The only certainty is that by morning, the scene was set. A gas can conspicuously placed, the remains of Ralphie, their late dog, positioned near Nabaruna's body, and a note, typed on a computer, its tone oddly impersonal. It was not until several hours after Nabaruna's death that 911 was called, a delay that would draw immediate suspicion. Why wait, if this was truly a suicide pact? The timing suggested something more calculating. Precious minutes or even hours used to stage the scene, plant evidence, erase mistakes. In the garage, detectives found a tarp, more unused zip ties, hints at other possibilities, perhaps other intentions never carried out. As investigators reconstructed those crucial hours, every detail pushed the story further from the narrative of a double suicide. 2 gunshot wounds, one to the back of the head, a clear execution shot. The second, at the left temple. Forensic experts would later confirm the fatal wound could not have been self-inflicted. By the time first responders entered the house, the crime was over, but the real investigation had only just begun. In those early morning hours, the line between truth and deception blurred, setting the stage for a case that would test the limits of forensic science and human trust. As the dust settled on Seagrave Place, detectives knew that the answers would lie not in the stories people told, but in the details left behind. This was no ordinary case. Every piece of evidence, every timestamp, and every line of code became a witness. The investigation unfolded step by step, methodical, relentless, unforgiving. The first cracks appeared with the physical evidence. Surveillance cameras and store receipts tied Michael Matthews to the purchase of the handgun, ammunition, red gas can, and zip ties on April 13th, just one day before the shooting. The firearm and ammunition were quickly matched to the bullets recovered at the scene. If this was a suicide, why was Matthews the only one buying the weapon? Forensic analysis made the picture even clearer. The most telling clue: the entry wound at the back of Nabaruna's head, a shot that no expert could attribute to self-infliction. There was no gunshot residue on her hands. Toxicology was negative. She hadn't been drugged, and there were no signs of impairment. The so-called suicide note? Investigators analyzed the document, comparing it to Nabaruna's writing style in emails and reports. It didn't match. The file had been created and printed from Matthews' device. Digital footprints became the silent whistleblowers. Matthews's internet search history revealed chilling queries. How to shoot someone to look like suicide. Staging gasoline explosion. How long does GSR last? Each search, each timestamp, was like a breadcrumb leading to a single, unavoidable conclusion. Even the printer logs told a story, showing the suicide note had been typed and printed by Matthews alone. Meanwhile, the human side of the investigation was just as revealing. Nabaruna's schedule was full. She had upcoming presentations at work, recent conversations with her parents, and colleagues who described her as future-focused, not desperate. There was no record of her owning a gun, nor of her ever expressing a desire to end her life. As detectives pieced together the evidence, the double suicide theory unraveled completely. The bullet trajectories, the forensic analysis, the timeline of the 911 call, and the abundance of staged props all pointed to one reality. This was a homicide, carefully disguised. The case for Matthews as a prime suspect was growing by the hour. But still, there remained one question. Could prosecutors prove, beyond any doubt, that this had been a meticulously staged Berstung? Sometimes, the difference between a story believed and a story exposed comes down to a single detail, a stray thread, a camera angle, or a data point buried in a sea of digital traces. In the Morrisville case, it was not one detail, but a chain of them that shifted everything. As investigators dug deeper, the web Matthews had woven began to unravel. The turning point came with the convergence of physical, digital, and forensic evidence. First, the medical examiner's conclusion was unambiguous: homicide. The trajectory of the fatal bullet, combined with the absence of gunshot residue on Nabaruna's hands, ruled out any possibility of suicide. But in the world of criminal justice, suspicion is not enough. There must be proof that stands up to scrutiny. Enter the surveillance footage. It clearly showed Matthews alone at the Bass Pro Shops counter, buying the exact make and model of the gun used in the crime, along with the red gas can and zip ties later found at the scene. He paid in cash, trying to cover his tracks, but technology left a trail he couldn't erase. Store receipts, time-stamped and itemized, matched the timeline to the minute. Even more damning was the digital evidence. Forensic linguists compared the so-called suicide note to samples of Nabaruna's past writing. The tone, syntax, and phrasing were all wrong. The note had been typed, not handwritten, a critical detail. Matthew's computer history was a roadmap of intent. Searches about simulating suicide, staging an explosion, and cleaning up gunshot residue. The file containing the note had been created on Matthews's laptop, printed just hours before the 911 call. By the time Matthews told his story, about a pact, about mutual despair, detectives were already watching the cracks widen. They knew the evidence didn't support his claims. When the forensics, video footage, and digital trails were finally combined, the narrative collapsed. The district attorney's office moved quickly, issuing an arrest warrant for Matthews shortly after the forensic report was finalized. In a case built on deception, the facts spoke louder than any alibi. The meticulous plan to stage a suicide could not survive the scrutiny of cross-disciplinary investigation. The truth, as it so often does, came out, not with a bang, but with the steady accumulation of details no one could explain away. When the dust of the investigation settled, all eyes turned to the Wake County Courthouse. Michael Aaron Matthews now faced the gravest of charges: first-degree murder. Prosecutors assembled a mountain of evidence: ballistics, forensic analysis, digital trails, and the haunting timeline of that April night. The community, still reeling from shock, watched closely, hoping for answers. But in the courtroom, the search for justice is never as simple as just laying out the facts. As the case prepared for trial, both sides knew the stakes were high. Matthew's defense team reviewed every detail, searching for cracks. Could they suggest doubt, spin a story of confusion, claim the evidence was circumstantial? Yet, the sheer volume of proof, the gun purchase, the absence of residue, the staged note, the digital search history, left little room for reasonable doubt. Prosecutors built a narrative of premeditation, pointing to Matthew's deliberate purchases, careful staging, and calculated delay in calling 911. On May 19, 2025, Matthews faced the judge for what many expected to be a drawn-out trial. Instead, the unexpected happened. Matthews pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, accepting a deal that would spare him a potential life sentence but guarantee a lengthy stay behind bars. The judge, Keith Gregory, reviewed the case file. Hundreds of pages of testimony, forensic data, and digital evidence. After confirming the plea matched the weight of the evidence, he handed down a sentence: 13 years to 16 years and 5 months in prison, accounting for time already served in pretrial detention. Outside the courthouse, reactions were mixed. Some felt the sentence was too lenient for a life taken and a family shattered. Others believed closure was finally possible. For Nabaruna's parents, who had traveled from India and attended every hearing, the verdict brought bittersweet relief. They had fought tirelessly to clear their daughter's name from the shadow of suicide, insisting on the truth, a truth finally recognized by the court. The trial was over, but for those left behind, the wounds would take far longer to heal. With the verdict delivered and the courtroom emptying, the reverberations of this tragedy continued to ripple through 2 continents. For Nabaruna's parents, Tapan and Saipra, the journey was far from over. They had crossed an ocean for justice, watching each day in court, reading every word of evidence, and refusing to let the narrative of double suicide stain their daughter's memory. For them, the verdict was not just a legal outcome, it was a restoration of truth. The Bengali community in North Carolina rallied. fundraising to support the grieving family, and hosting memorials in Nabaruna's honor. Yet beneath the gestures of solidarity, there was also a sobering sense of vulnerability. How could someone so bright, so accomplished, fall victim to such calculated violence, right in her own home? The conversations extended beyond grief, touching on the silent risks of emotional isolation, the subtle signs of distress that so often go unnoticed until it's too late. Public reaction was divided. Some argued that the sentence was too light, that justice demanded more than 13 years behind bars. Others pointed to the difficulty of prosecuting intimate partner violence, how even the most thorough investigation can't restore what's been lost. What most agreed on was this: a confession was necessary for closure, but it could never bring back what had been taken. Through it all, Nabaruna's family pressed a single message: justice is not about vengeance, but about bringing the truth to light. They hoped her story would remind others that no life should be reduced to rumor or staged evidence. The diligence of investigators across ballistics, forensic linguistics, digital analysis, and patient reconstruction of the timeline proved that even the most elaborate cover-up can unravel under careful scrutiny. Yet, the case is also a stark warning. Domestic violence, especially when hidden behind closed doors, rarely comes with flashing signs. The signals, withdrawal, emotional fatigue, subtle pleas for help, are easy to overlook. This tragedy is a somber reminder that silence and secrecy can be deadly. As the Matthews case fades from headlines, its lessons remain. Justice can be slow and imperfect, but the truth matters. And in a world where appearances often mask reality, it is the relentless search for answers that keeps memory and justice alive. In the quiet suburb of Morrisville, North Carolina, the shocking death of Nabaruna Karmakar was first reported as a double suicide. But as investigators pulled apart the details, ballistics, digital traces, and the chilling evidence left at the scene, a different story emerged. This was not a tragedy born of despair, but a carefully staged homicide by the very person she trusted most. Nabaruna's journey, from Kolkata to a promising career in America, was marked by resilience, intellect, and love for her heritage. Yet, behind closed doors, subtle signs of emotional exhaustion and isolation went unheeded. In the end, a community's determination, a family's refusal to accept easy answers, and the tireless work of investigators brought the truth to light. Justice was served, not through vengeance, but by uncovering every hidden detail. The case stands as a stark warning. Not all wounds are visible, and even the safest spaces can conceal danger. It is a story that urges us to listen closely, to look beyond the surface, and to never underestimate the power of truth. If this story moved you, help keep these conversations alive. Like, follow, and subscribe for more true crime investigations, because every victim deserves a voice, and every truth deserves to be told. Share this episode to spread awareness and join our community seeking answers behind the headlines.